Hello, cooking enthusiasts. This week's video is going to be another dry aging update. My last update on this was about 2 months ago, and I had two dry aging mutton projects in the works, and now those are both completed. As a little refresher, one of the pieces of mutton got an experimental tomato and herb marinade for about a week before dry aging for a moderate amount of time, and the other piece of mutton was pretty standard, except for a very light mustard brush to act as a little bit of an antioxidant. The basic mustard brushed piece went for my longest dry aging time so far at around 70 days. But first, let's talk about the more experimental piece. Overall, I would say this experiment is a failure in that it did not have the intended goal. This attempt of trying to infuse flavor into the meat before dry aging was not successful. It didn't really taste like tomatoes or herbs at all. However, it wasn't a complete failure because the resulting product was still very delicious, and it also proved that my dry aging setup in my fridge does work. One interesting takeaway from this experiment is that I think this dry aged mutton definitely tasted a little bit cleaner than previous batches, especially considering it aged a little over 40 days after the marination. I suspect this has something to do with the acidity of the tomato marinade, again, potentially acting as an antioxidant, as I intended with the other mustard-based experiment. But I would need to run some other experiments to confirm. I also think the concept in general is possible. I was able to flavor some dry aged beef by cold smoking it first, so I think the marination technique could work. It just needs to be a much stronger flavor. Now let's turn to the other piece of dry aged mutton I was working on. Again, this went for my longest time ever at just around 70 days. And again, pretty standard, except for a light brushing of a mustard and vinegar substance. But honestly, I don't think it made much of a difference. Overall, though, it looked pretty good. I've only tasted a few tiny samples of the meat, and it's pretty good. This is definitely as far as I would push dry aging mutton, probably. It's a less bulky animal, so similar to dry aging smaller pieces of beef, there's a decent amount of loss once you have to trim the dry aged meat. The ratio of bone to meat is also higher which further reduces the yield. So I would say I definitely recommend mutton as a meat in general, especially with my sous vide technique. Because of the affordability, I think some of those downsides are mitigated and do make it a good beginner dry aging process, assuming you like the flavor. I would say as a minimum, you want to go 30 or 35 days, and then a maximum up to 50 days if you want something particularly funky. Anything beyond that, I need to do a bit more recipe testing to determine if it's really worth it. Obviously, I still hope to make some future recipe videos actually working with the dry-aged mutton, but for now, I don't have any other dry aging projects on the go. I'm still unsure if I'm going to try to track down some more mutton because of the price, or if I'm going to splurge on some beef. If you have any ideas for dry aging experiments you would like me to try, please let me know. In the meantime, I might use the setup for some smaller scale charcuterie projects. And again, if you have any questions about all of this, please let me know in the comments. Hopefully this information was interesting. Be sure to follow me on social media for more frequent updates. Otherwise, thank you for watching.